When it comes to creating audio assets for video games, there's a lot of different things that we need to take into account. For example, we need to look at how close or how far away from something that the player could possibly be, whether they're coming in from the left or maybe the right. There's a lot of different things that we have to look at, and because of that, we more often than not have to create multiple variations for one particular sound. And so if you've ever created game audio assets, I'm sure you've spent hours upon hours inside your DAW, meticulously layering sounds together, getting it where you want, printing it out, and then going back, making subtle tweaks to things like pitches or speeds or things of that nature, and then printing out another variation, and so on and so forth. And while your DAW can be a great place to edit audio assets, today we're going to be taking a look at why you should not be mixing game audio inside your DAW. So if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future content. And if you'd like to be a part of the Sound Effects Guy Discord server, you'll find a link in the description below. So with that being said, let's get started. So there's a couple different reasons why you shouldn't be mixing inside your DAW for game audio. And the first and probably the most important is the fact that your DAW in this situation is not your production environment. Your DAW is simply a tool to help you create different assets. So let's say, for example, you were working on a piece of linear media like film or television, and you needed some nature ambience. So you grab your field recorder and you head out into the woods, and you know that in the final mix, that ambience is probably going to be pretty low in the mix, especially if there's action sequences or dialogue or something like that happening. But what you're not going to do is you're not going to turn your volume down to try and match what you think that final mix level is going to be. Instead, you're going to turn your volume up to try and capture as much of that ambience as possible. That way, once you get into your DAW, which in linear media is most likely your production environment, you have as much usable content to mix with. Well, when it comes to game audio, the engine is your production environment. So whether you're creating things like ambience, or footsteps, or gunshots, or explosions, or spaceship flybys, or whatever the case may be, inside your DAW, regardless of what those assets are, you want to be creating as much usable content as possible. Another reason that you shouldn't be mixing inside your DAW is, let's say we're working on gunshot assets. So in your DAW, maybe you just picked up Weaponizer from Krotos and you get the plugin set up, you hit the fire button 5-10 times, and now you have 5 to 10 different gunshots to work with. So you chop those up, you throw them into the engine, but those 5 to 10 gunshots are all you have to work with. So if the player gets into an intense gun battle, it's very possible that they're going to hear the same asset over and over again. But what if instead we took all the individual elements of that gunshot? So the close-up gunshot, the tail, the thump that gives it some weight, any mechanical sounds or foley to that weapon, like the trigger pull or the pin movement, or, obviously it's going to be different depending on the weapon, but you get the gist of what I'm trying to say. So instead of taking those fully designed gunshots, we're just taking the elements, we're putting it into the engine. And if you've watched any of the content on my channel, you know that I like to work out of Unreal Engine. And so in Unreal Engine, we have things like the meta sounds in Unreal Engine 5. So now, instead of just manipulating those complete assets, we have the ability to manipulate and modulate all of the different layers. So we can take the thump and modulate it between a certain frequency, or we can change the volume and make that thump a little heavier or lighter, or the gunshot itself, or, maybe it's a cinematic and the camera flies in for a close up of the trigger pull. We can make that trigger pull a little louder. But inside the engine, we're now creating, instead of having 5 to 10 different assets to work with, we have almost an infinite number of different variations to that asset as opposed to just a few. Which kind of brings me into my next point, file size. If we create 5 to 10 different assets, depending on the length, we have a set file size. But if we're just taking these individual layers, we now have the ability to create far more variables in the same file size. Because if we were to try and create hundreds or thousands of variations that we're creating with the engine inside your DAW, your game file is going to be huge. Last but not least, the way that your audio sounds inside your DAW may not be exactly how it sounds in your engine. So let's do a little experiment. What I have here is a magical spell sound that I created using Weaponizer, and we're going to export this out of Pro Tools into Unreal Engine, a brand new project, no post-processing other than whatever Unreal Engine does to audio files upon import. We'll record out what comes out of Unreal Engine and import that waveform back into Pro Tools, and that way we can compare it. So here is the sound in Pro Tools. So now we have a basic third-person project here, and I'm just going to go ahead and import our wave file. And this is exactly what I bounced out of Pro Tools. And we'll go ahead and save that. And if we hit play, so using OBS, I've now recorded that file out of Unreal Engine. And so let's jump back into Pro Tools and compare those waveforms. So we've taken our recording out of Unreal Engine and re-imported it back into our Pro Tools session. And you can tell right away just by looking at these waveforms that they're different. The one on the top is what we had in Pro Tools. The one on the bottom is what we put into Unreal Engine. And you can already see the compression that Unreal Engine applies to audio files. And again, that compression within the engine is variable. You can change it. But I left everything by default, and you can already see that in the original file, it was a lot more dynamic. There's a lot more transients on here, and the one from Unreal Engine is a lot more squished, and it's also quieter. So I'll play these for you here real quick. So again, this is our original. And this is from Unreal Engine. So while the sound effect is still a magical whoosh, you can not only see, but also hear that there is a difference. And if you're mixing inside of your DAW, you're not accounting for these things. So that's going to wrap things up for this video. Hopefully this was something that you found informative. If you agree or disagree, let me know in the comments below. Or if there's any other topics you'd like to see me cover on this channel, you can let me know in the comments as well. Or again, you can get a hold of me on the Sound Effects Guide Discord server. Until next time.